Okay, welcome everybody. As you've gathered, I'm not Karen, so you've got to endure my chairing for another session, but having two in a week apart is probably gets me well oiled, so I appreciate the opportunity. Okay, so welcome to everyone who's watching and participating in the virtual cabinet meet, the virtual climate emergency sustainability scrutiny panel today. Due to the ongoing COVID situation and a desire to retain a level of social distancing at council meetings at this time, we are holding this meeting virtually. We will review this approach for any future meetings in line with government and the health guidance at that time. As has been our current practice, are initially going to be encouraging members to ask 2 questions on the agenda items. And then if we've got time, we'll try and squeeze in extra questions if we've got time. Ooh, just clocked handy waits in the wings. In terms of item 2, apologies for absence. Michaela, can you walk us through who's not with us today?
Yes, Councillor Karen Walker sent apologies. I believe Councillor Paul Crossley cannot be with us. And Councillor Andy Waite is joining us in the Lib Dem vacancy slot.
Thank you very much and good to see everybody. Okay, in terms of item 3, declarations of interest, as is usual for all council meetings, if you've got any declarations, please declare them now. Or if you think of them as we're going through the meeting, then feel free to declare them as it occurs to you. Nobody seems to be indicating, so we'll move on. Item 4, urgent business agreed by the chair. There is none, so we'll move straight on to item 5. So as I understand it, we've got one statement from a member of the public. David Redgewell is, I believe, somewhere in the wings and is going to join us. So if you're there, David, the floor is yours.
He hasn't joined the meeting yet, so you can let him.
Okay, if we just get around that slightly. So we've also had 2 questions sent in by Councillor Joanna Wright, and I understand that the answers have been provided to those questions in the emails to the panel members, so those answers are set out for you. Okay. Still no David?
Okay.
If we move on to item 6, the minutes, and when David appears, we'll go back to it. So we've had the minutes of the previous meeting circulated, I think, which is pretty impressive, Michaela, to turn those around in a week. So can I just confirm that they're a correct and accurate record? And I guess I'm seeing a nod from Grant. Can we take that as a proposal? That yeah, and somebody to second them? Yeah, thank you, Shelley. So those. Do we normally vote on that, or do we just accept them? No, thank you. Okay, so we'll take those as then proposed and seconded. Have we yet got David in the room?
No.
No. Okay. So it's the thing for us to do if David appears to say that we're moving on to the next agenda item, and he's welcome to stay after we complete the next agenda item, and then we'll bring him in at that stage. So if we move on to item 7, the air quality data update, I understand Catherine Brown and Councillor Sarah Warren are going to be speaking to this. Catherine, are you going to kick us off and then go to Sarah for some additional comments?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. We have a presentation to share with you, and Councillor Warren is going to lead on that, and I will assist, as will other members of the team who are also here this afternoon.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, Sarah, when you're ready, we're, I think, good to go.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I've got my video on at the moment, but I may need to switch it off because sometimes I don't have enough internet signal. So thanks very much. So we'll go to the next slide. So we've been monitoring air quality in Bath and North East Somerset for a long time. This is the content of the presentation today. So we're going to talk about the pollutants of concern, how we publicise the data, the air quality results in Bath for 2021, the air quality results more widely in the air quality management areas, the new guidance coming in with the Environment Act and the World Health Organization rules, and future release of air quality data information. So on to the next slide. Okay. So nitrogen dioxide, our main pollutants that we're most interested in monitoring in Bath and North East Somerset are nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter. Nitrogen dioxide arises from combustion, and it's produced by the combination of oxides of nitrogen and oxygen in the atmosphere. And the most significant source for us in Bath and North East Somerset is from motor vehicles. Particulate matter, we've got two sizes. We've got particulate matter less than 10 micrometers in diameter, which is known as PM10s, and we have PM 2.5s below 2.5 micrometers in diameter. And that's produced from tyres and brakes of traffic, amongst other sources, which is one reason why we find a lot on roads. And we do also monitor benzene, but it's nowhere near the objective levels, so it's not of concern. On to the next page. So we have 4 reference monitoring locations, which are our most accurate analyzers. They're located on London Road, Snow Hill, the Guildhall and Windsor Bridge, and they give us hourly data, which is aggregated to provide monthly results and to measure both nitrogen dioxide and particulates. The other method of monitoring we have is diffusion tubes. We have 184 of them all over Bath and North East Somerset at the moment. But they monitor air pollution over much longer periods. So typically they're left out for a month at a time. You can see them dotted around the district on lampposts, and officers from environmental monitoring team change them on a monthly basis. On to the next page. So in terms of where you can find out what the air quality is like in an area that you're interested in, we have, this page you can see from our Bath and North East Somerset Council website. So we've got an online map of all the monitoring sites, and you can click on so there's those little circles in the middle of the map represent the monitoring site. And if you click on one of those circles, you'll bring up a graph like this one here, which shows the monitoring information we have in Midsummer Norton and Radstock. Here you can see the concentrations on Midsummer Norton High Street from 2014 to 2017. And the reason that monitoring stopped in 2017 at this location was because concentrations were so low, because you can see that yellow line there above all those bars is the limit value. The graphs, yeah, that's fine, yep, okay. So how we present it, so we can also, the live data from any of the 4 reference analyzers can also be accessed and downloaded by anyone at any time. And at the moment, you would download that in tables of data. And we do have plans to upgrade that so that we've got a bit more of a digest in graphs, and it will be a bit more user-friendly. But we're waiting on the web team to have capacity to do that work. And otherwise, if you want to read a digest of the annual data, you can read the annual status reports, which you can also access from our website. And they detail the air quality situation across the district in great depth, and that we have reports since 2016 available on our website. If anybody needs the information in some other format, you should just get in touch with the environmental monitoring team. On to the next page. And then this is one of our Bath Clean Air Zone monitoring reports. So far we've reported on the first 2 quarters of the Clean Air Zone. So we'll soon be receiving the 3rd quarter report, and then an annual Clean Air Zone report for the calendar year of 2021. Because in terms of the legal requirement on us, that is based on calendar years of data, averages over. So the report focuses not only on air quality, but also on the impacts that the Clean Air Zone might have had on traffic flow, and on levels of vehicle compliance and any other variables that feel relevant. So in terms of the results in the most recent quarterly report, average nitrogen dioxide concentrations within the clean air zone are 14% lower than for the same period in 2019, which represents a reduction of 4 micrograms per cubic metre. That's the average reading across the total of 35 monitoring sites within the clean air zone that recorded full quarterly data from July to September in both 2019 and 2021. Acknowledging this general improvement, quarterly average concentrations of nitrogen dioxide at 9 monitoring sites still record results greater than 40 micrograms per cubic metre, the limit value. The average change between these 9 sites was in fact an increase of 0.7 micrograms per cubic metre, or a 1.6% increase. Quarters 2 and 3 are available on our website, and officers are in the process of compiling the annual report. On to the next slide. So this shows the average nitrogen dioxide concentrations within the clean air zone, which is shown in dark blue. In Bath, outside the clean air zone boundary, which is in green. In wider Bath and North East Somerset, which is shown in purple, and also just our 4 reference analyzers in light blue. And that data is shown monthly since 2017, with the vertical orange stripes representing the national lockdowns. You can see that there's a strong reducing trend, which was happening naturally already due to engine improvements. But you can also see the seasonal rises and falls in nitrogen dioxide, with peaks in winter and dips in summer, relating to the weather and how that impacts on the nitrogen oxides in the atmosphere. There was a greater reduction than would normally be seen during the first lockdown. On to the next page. So in terms of the clean air zone assessment, so the Clean Air Zone team constantly monitor and review the situation, both within and outside the clean air zone, so as to understand the real world effect that it's had on areas that were modelled to have an increase in traffic or nitrogen dioxide levels. These include our hot spots with high levels of pollution, as well as areas where residents feel there's been displacement of traffic away from the clean air zone. So, for example, we've got Chapel Row and Broad Street that are still showing in the most recent quarterly report as hotspots, and we believe that they've seen increased pollution due to the closure of Cleveland Bridge. And then to discuss Whiteway Road, residents have been concerned about possible traffic displacement there. And we have seen a slight increase in traffic. The proportion of HGVs remains at the same percentage of the total at 5%. And air quality has been largely unchanged, and pollution is not terribly high there. But we will continue to monitor, particularly we'll look again once Cleveland Bridge has reopened, because it's hard, as in many of our sites around the city, it's hard to tease out the effects of the clean air zone from the effects of the Cleveland Bridge closure. On to the next page. So in terms of the compliance of the vehicles driving in the clean air zone, you can see from this graph showing in different colours, we've got taxis, buses and coaches, vans, and different sizes of HGVs. We can see that as the clean air zone went live in March, there was a rapid increase in compliance of those vehicles driving within the clean air zone. Almost all the buses have now been retrofitted in purple, and 1,500 people have passed eligibility tests to receive finance to upgrade their vehicles. On to the next. So now we're moving away from Bath and into the wider air quality management areas around Bath and North East Somerset, moving to Temple Cloud and Farrington Gurney, so Temple Cloud first, where we've seen a reduction in nitrogen dioxide from 90 micrograms per cubic metre in 2016, so a dramatic reduction from extremely high levels. So the measures that have been implemented here have been highly effective. So the air quality management area was declared here in 2018 following breaches of the nitrogen dioxide concentration levels. Initially, we had 3 diffusion tubes out, but more have been added more recently so that we understand the issues in this location, because they have at times been in the past been so serious. 2 locations are still breaching the objective level, where there's a particular circumstance around the facades of the properties being very close to the road and the fumes that traffic emit as they accelerate up the hill. Even though local air quality monitoring focuses on external air quality monitoring, officers have also monitored inside the properties that are nearest to the road and have been satisfied that the indoor concentrations are well below the Public Health England threshold. The highest concentration they found was 11 micrograms per cubic metre. On to the next. Oh, I should add that Councillor Wood leads on this area and meets with officers fortnightly to ensure that good progress is being made. Now at Farrington Gurney, it was included in the air quality management area in 2018, as there had been some breaches, but the good news is that they are now beneath the objective levels. It doesn't mean that Farrington Gurney will be excluded from the Air Quality Action Plan, as there are some key developments planned locally, such as the Summer Valley Enterprise Zone, and officers will need to be satisfied that that will not have an adverse impact on air quality. On to the next. So this is a bit more information about the actions that are contained within the Air Quality Action Plan at Temple Cloud and Farrington Gurney. So I'll let you read that for a second.
Can you just clarify, Sarah, why undertaking the cutback of trees is included?
I would have to
Do you want me to answer that, Sarah?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So we just finish the presentation and then we'll pick up the questions, if that's okay.
Great. Very pleased to see Dave there so that he can pick up that question. Okay, so on to Keynsham, yeah. So Keynsham Air Quality Management Area was declared in 2010, and the Air Quality Action Plan included the trial of the High Street one-way system. Air pollution reduced significantly along the High Street as a result of the one-way scheme, and despite changes in traffic circulation, pollution has also reduced in the surrounding area. The technical work can now commence on the revocation of the air quality management area due to pollution levels being significantly below the objective level for more than 3 years. So that's a real good news story. On to the next. So in Salford, an air quality management area was declared in 2013, and air pollution levels have continued to decrease for some time. Salford has benefited from the general improvement in vehicle emissions as a result of natural fleet turnover and bus retrofit as part of the Clean Air Zone, and also the Clean Bus Technology Fund before it. Work can commence on the required technical assessments that precede revocation here. And around the rest of North East Somerset, we're always looking for hotspots of pollution. So if any of the panel, or in fact members of the public, have suggested areas for monitoring in future, please just get in touch with us. And we can get some diffusion tubes out there to see what's going on. Now on to the next, please. So now this is sort of looking ahead, really. What recent developments have there been globally? So there have been a few developments in terms of air quality legislation and guidance. Recently, the Environment Act, which received royal assent in 2021, contains provision to strengthen powers within smoke control areas. And on the left, you can see that the World Health Organization published their updated air quality guidelines. You can see, for example, that the annual average concentration of nitrogen dioxide guideline has been reduced from 40 to 10 micrograms per cubic metre. It's not binding on us, and the UK government have said that they will be consulting on whether those levels should be enshrined in UK legislation. So over the course of 2022, they will be consulting. And I wrote to the Minister last month, actually, to urge rapid adoption of the new guidelines into UK law. The World Health Organization has, I think, indicated that the targets, that interim targets may be necessary on the way down to 10, because I think it acknowledges that the new guidelines are challenging for cities. On to the next. So, how can the panel and members of the public keep updated with air quality over the next year? As I mentioned earlier, the Clean Air Zone annual report will be published in July, and that will detail what's happened in and around the Clean Air Zone during 2021. At the same time, the first quarterly report of 2022 will be published. Alongside these Clean Air Zone reports, the annual status report for the entire district will be published, and of course, the live information from any of the 4 reference analysers can be downloaded at any time. And that's the end of the presentation. So officers and I will be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Quite a lot of detail to take on board, so appreciate that, and you did that at pace. All right, Lisa, you were keen to kind of ask an initial question. Do you want to go ahead with your question, which I think Dave was going to provide the response to.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think David got it. It was a question where we want to plant more trees, why we're cutting them back.
So why are we cutting back the trees on the Temple Cloud AQMA area? Yes, so there's two issues with tree and vegetation there in that AQMA. So the first one is on the narrow stretch of road. There's a particular point on the narrow stretch of road where those two slightly excessive readings still remain that have come down from 90 down to 44, so very nearly compliant, but not quite compliant. So at that point of the road, there was a canopy of tree coverage that was essentially trapping the pollution in at that point of the road. So a little bit of pruning has just allowed it to dissipate to nothing at that point. So that was issue number one. Slightly related to that, a vegetation cut back issue. This was more kind of weeds by the side of the road, more so than trees. But weeds by the side of the roads was essentially narrowing that section of the road further, which was causing more issues with stopping of vehicles that would need to stop to allow each other past. So a little bit of cutting back there has allowed a slightly freer flow of traffic, which has helped as well.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And thank you, Lisa, for the question. Grant, you're next.
Hi. Yeah, I think like due to the lockdowns and the closure of Cleveland Bridge, I think it's difficult to draw any proper or meaningful conclusions from the bulk of this data. And it's no fault of anyone on the council, obviously. There are things that have impacted us all in lots of different ways. But it would be interesting to see the long-term trends, which obviously we're not going to be able to see properly for another couple of years, I wouldn't have thought. I do have a couple of questions. I will go to something first that you referenced in your presentation, Sarah, on the enterprise zone and making sure that that doesn't have an impact on Farrington Gurney. And I would struggle based on, because I'm on the stakeholder group for the enterprise zone, based on the plans that we've seen, and I hope Ryan would probably back this up, that it doesn't seem to include many changes to improve traffic flow in Farrington Gurney. So I don't know how, a massive development like this will have a really large impact in terms of vehicles using the A37 to access it. So what have you been told about that process that is going to see these levels stay below the threshold, basically, that you want it to? And then the other thing, I just wanted to try and work out, and it might just be as simple as, where the junction, I had a quick look at the map in Temple Cloud, and it does appear that the ones that are still above the threshold are right by a junction and at the pinch point where there's a very narrow road. Because there seems to be a difference between Temple Cloud and, say, Farrington Gurney, Pensford and Whitchurch, when you'd assume really that the majority of the vehicles travelling along that the A37 would have a similar impact to all those sites. Yet we're seeing obviously it seems a lot worse in Temple Cloud. So have we sort of worked out the main reasons why that is?
Great. Is that Dave? Is signalling? Yep.
Yep. I'm happy to answer that one. So it's very kind of localized specific. So as you say, it's pretty much the same traffic traveling that whole length of road, and it really is just about the physical feature of the road at those sites. So it's so much narrower and so much more built up at that place in Temple Cloud compared to Pensford, which whilst is built up, it's got a big kind of wall by the side of the road in Pensford. The road is just slightly wider, and in Farrington Gurney, there's a lot more open space around the road than there is in Temple Cloud. Whereas in Temple Cloud, you've got a combination of very old houses whose walls literally go up against the road, and then quite sort of high hedges on the other side of the road. So it's just that much more constrained.
And was someone going to pick up the first point that Grant raised about the enterprise zone and its impacts?
I'm happy to do that, Chair. I'm Alid Williams. I'm the Environmental Protection Manager. So with any significant development like this, travel plans and traffic assessments will be part of the pre-app and the planning application. and officers will get information in relation to the number and type of vehicles associated with the development. And all this will feed into an air quality impact assessment, which will tell us what the impact is on PM2.5, PM10s, nitrogen dioxide at the various stages. So that's how we will assess the impact this scheme will have on AQ, air quality.
Okay. And have we got any more? I guess Grant was kind of wanting a little bit possibly more detail about that. Are we about the size of the development versus the kind of level of impact?
I don't have any information to share with you today, I'm afraid, panel.
There's a bit I could actually answer if that's right, that I'm aware of. So obviously you've only done the enterprise segment group quite recently, but in the past there's been where we've talked about the potential highways measures along the A362. So for Farrington Gurney, a couple of things that are in the plans are, as you enter Farrington Gurney from Old Mills, where all the road parked cars are there, so there's potential for extending the road there, so purchasing the very bottom of that field, extending the road there, and then also at the junction with the A37, extending that 2-lane approach. So of course, where it goes in 2 lanes, it only does right at the very end of the road. So basically that occurring a bit sooner.
Okay, can I suggest maybe we follow that up offline if that's not sufficient for Grant to kind of get that detail? So that's really helpful. Thank you. If we move on to, I think I've got Andy Waite next.
Thank you, Chair. Good report, Sarah. Love the speed you rattled through it. Very impressive. My question is quite a simple one because I'm not normally on this panel. It's to do with the nitrogen dioxide diffusion tubes. Sarah said in her presentation that they were looked at once a month. And my question is, what sort of data do these tubes give you? Because looking at the tubes, they don't look as though they have special consideration. So is the data drawn digitally, or is it just on the screen? Is it a minimum, maximum? And hence my question.
Okay. Yeah, Catherine.
So if I take that one, thank you for the question. And it's a good question to ask, because you're right. People look at these little tubes and think, well, how on earth can they monitor pollution? But they contain a chemical luminescence material that absorbs nitrogen dioxide. So we erect them in a location for a month. They are then collected after that time, sent off to a laboratory. In the laboratory, do that analysis for us. So we get a monthly level from them. And then because the annual average nitrogen dioxide level is a year, we then take that 12 months of data and we average those results. And that's how we get that annual average results. In some locations, we have triplicate diffusion tubes, so where we want the greatest level of accuracy that we can get, we will put 3 up. So we then average those 3 results, because we do get issues, believe it or not, where sometimes spiders will inconveniently spin a web in one of these tubes, which means that it can't be analysed that month. So we do put up duplicates sometimes to guard against that. Does that answer your question?
Can I have a follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused. So when the tube goes off to be analysed in the laboratory, you then talked about averaging it over 12 years. So what is the analysis that goes on at the laboratory, and what is the data that you get back from the laboratory? Is it just an average for the month, or is it a maximum and a minimum, or is it various other readings? Is it every day? What is it?
It will be, and correct me if I'm wrong, team, it's an average for the month.
Yeah, it's how much nitrogen dioxide has been absorbed by that material over the course of the month. So then you get the monthly readings per month, and at the end of the year, then that's averaged to give you the annual average nitrogen dioxide concentrations at that location.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's always good to know the science. It's always helpful. Ryan, I think you're next.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Joe. So a couple of questions. So in our paper 3.9, it says about the World Health Organization basically wants a more ambitious limit for the nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter levels. So I was just wondering, do we know what level that will be? Because of course that will affect, just how many places in our authority will then be over that limit if that does come into force. So of course, obviously, nitrogen oxide says 40 at the moment. If it's 35, it's 30. That will really affect just how many places in our authority will then need to become AQMAs. And I was also just wondering sort of what would the plan be then? Would we presumably would get more funding from the government if that would were to occur? My second question was just in regards to Temple Cloud. There's still a couple places where it's still over the limit, and if that continues to be the case, obviously don't really know that yet, but if it does, would that warrant some additional action being taken on top of what's already been done?
Thank you, Ryan. I think I heard in Sarah's presentation that the proposal is to go from 40 to 10, but maybe the impact on that would be really helpful, Sarah.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Have we lost Sarah? She was there and now she's gone. Is one of the team able to pick that up, or shall we wait till Sarah?
Shall I pick it up for you, Chair? So
lovely.
Yes, you're correct that the guideline value is 10 micrograms per meter cubed, down from 40. That is hugely ambitious target to achieve, and our assumption is that there would be some kind of action plan to have interim targets for cities like Bath and other locations to be able to move towards achieving them. There is a public consultation due to come out very soon on seeking views on how those targets should be enshrined into legislation, the outcome of which should be, I believe, in autumn of this year. So we'll know more then.
Would it be sensible if we bring that back then to this group to kind of understand how much of the authority will be then reaching the limits of World Health Authority and what the implications are for us about how we deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be good to wait for that consultation to come out and understand what that's asking, and then we can bring a paper to you to look at our current levels and how we will perform against them.
Okay, Michaela, if we capture that and then we'll put that on the forward plan, that would be great. Okay, I think shall I try and sneak in my questions? So it was really helpful, Sarah, that you talked about
my second question.
Oh, go ahead, Ryan. You have your second one first.
I just asked with them. I assume Dave was going to answer.
Yes, I'll come in on that. One. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we've seen quite a significant drop off at those locations in Temple Cloud, based on a general trajectory that's downwards anyway, but needed jump starting because it couldn't be left to go on the natural rate that it was going on. So some interventions taken so far and some further interventions that are planned to improve levels at that site. So a further couple of interventions around HGV sort of light up signage that you've seen very briefly on the presentation, and we're also looking at some tech solutions there as well. So hopeful that those will bring them down to the right level. And the other context here as well is there'll be an impact of the Bristol CAS on the A37, as most of the A37 traffic is Bristol bound, and the impacts that CAS will have on the general fleet that's going up and down the A37 will have an impact too.
Okay, you went slightly muffly in the middle. Ryan, were you happy that you heard the gist of that?
Yes, there was a little bit muffly, but I did manage to hear it all.
Perfect, lovely. If I go on to my question, Sarah, you very helpfully highlighted some of the issues about vehicle displacement, and in particular, one of my hobby horses, which is about sort of the Rush Hill, Pennyquick piece. My question was really, it's quite impenetrable to kind of get that data out of the reports. And is there a way we can make those a little bit easier for both panel members and members of the public to kind of get a kind of a handle on vehicle displacement? Is there a way that we can, in the way we bring forward these reports in the future, make them a little bit easier to kind of navigate, to kind of answer those kind of questions about vehicle displacement?
Specifically on Whiteway Road and Rush Hill, I've suggested now that we catch up with between the relevant ward councillors and the officers and have a meeting to look at the data in detail and discuss what actions may be possible. And it may be that in the course of that meeting, we could look at the data and try to, work out what would be more easily digestible for members of the public. If there's a different layout or different format that would work better for them, we could discuss that perhaps in that forum.
Okay, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Okay, we're doing quite well on time, so I think we've got room to go round again if people have got questions that they want to explore a bit further, or people, if people indicate in the chat. We do have a nice big paper to keep ourselves entertained moving forward, so if not, we can move on. Before we move on to the climate emergency paper, has David managed to appear, or are we assuming he's not coming now?
He still hasn't joined the meeting.
Okay, I think, okay, well, we're assuming he's not coming then, unless somebody tells me. Okay,
Chair,
yeah.
Councillor Malloy, I think, wishes to speak. I think she's got a question.
Thank you, Catherine. Ruth.
Yeah, thank you. So it's sort of following on from what you said, actually, Joel, about traffic displacement since the CAS. I can't remember which of the reports it was in, but somewhere it says that you're going to be analysing certain routes in and out of Bath where there's been particular concerns expressed by residents. So I think Rush Hill is probably one of them. Also in Western Lane is another one. So just to say, well, I'm interested, what can you tell us what the other routes are, or that you'll be putting extra emphasis on?
So currently, if you look at the appendix to our most recent quarterly report, I think there are 18 locations there that are listed where we've had concerns expressed to us. They're all at various different stages of investigation. We've been able to eliminate some of them in terms of not having any significant CAS displacement impact. Others, like Whiteway Road, Lansdowne Lane, are locations where we knew during our full business case modelling that there could be increases. So we are keeping a very close eye on that. As Councillor Johnson alluded to earlier on in the meeting, the last quarter it's been quite tricky because of the significance of the Cleveland Bridge closure and what that has had on traffic flows through the city. But we continued with the monitoring because it helps build up knowledge, doesn't it, about how traffic moves around. And we are committed to repeating that monitoring in Whiteway Road, Lansdowne Lane for certain, once the bridge is fully reopened. And we will be doing that with temporary AMPR cameras, which means that we can get the compliance splits of vehicles that are using those particular routes to give us an indication, is there displacement going on, and if so, to what extent? And thank you for the feedback about how we convey the information. It's quite technical, but I think in my mind we need to come up with some sort of template that looks at speed, vehicle splits, compliance splits, and things like that in a way that's easy for people to understand and get a snapshot of what's going on.
That'd be really helpful. Thank you. Okay, Ruth.
No, just a bit more feedback. I was going to say, looking at all the data and so on, I really like the use of the bar charts with the horizontal lines, so it makes it very visually easier to understand, I think, than all the tables with lots and lots of figures. Of course, that's where you get the detail, but I think the bar chart's good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move us on, I think, to item 8. Just before we kick that off, I guess my reflection chairing the meeting today is that while it's really helpful to have presentations, it would be even more helpful if we could have them with at least a weekend before the panel on Monday to read them, if that's possible, because it will mean that we'll get better value, I think, from the scrutiny process if we do that. So if we can work towards that, that would be really helpful. So Sarah, again, are you kicking this off and bringing other people in for the presentations?
Yeah, it's me again. And so thank you for the feedback. I'll try and go a bit slower than this time. So someone, I hope, has a copy of the presentation to put up. Brilliant. Thanks, Michaela. Okay, so we're doing the climate emergency reports draft for the next council meeting. So just to give you a bit of the context, so this is a report on the last year, really, that you've had. So to give you a bit of context about 2021, it was the 6th warmest year on record, and there's been extreme weather, which has included record-breaking snowfall in Madrid and Texas, floods in Manchester, New South Wales, West Germany, China, record-breaking heat waves in Moscow and the Pacific Northwest, and wildfires in Oregon, Greece, and Western Australia. In terms of the climate science, an IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Assessment report of the latest science was published in August, which was more definitive than ever about the seriousness of the impacts and links, the impacts of the climate change and the links to the human causes. So it described the situation as a code red for humanity. It demands an immediate response across all areas of society and reinforces the importance of 2030 net zero. And then COP26 was hosted in Glasgow. That's the conference of the parties. It's the International Climate Change Conference, and some progress was made, but not enough. And meanwhile, in terms of the national context, our government is still on a 2050 trajectory, which is too slow, bluntly. Client Earth is currently taking the UK, so Client Earth is a group of campaigning lawyers, and they're currently taking the UK government to court over its inadequate net zero strategy, arguing that its failure to set out credible policies to tackle climate change is unlawful. So as a council, we don't have all relevant powers or finance, and we have, of course, been severely impacted, not only by austerity and then by the financial impact of COVID. We are not receiving the support we need to from government in terms of our 2030 objective, which is what is supported by the science as opposed to their 2050 objective. So 2021 has not been an easy year for us in many ways. As you remember, last January to March, we were in a total COVID lockdown, and the COVID impacts have continued on the council all year long, well, what with staff sickness and some turnover of staff. On to the next page. So in spite of this difficult context, I think that you will agree by the end of our discussion that we are taking an enormous amount of action and demonstrating leadership ranging across every area of council activity. So the Local Government Association has designed 10 questions to help scrutiny panels in scrutinising climate action by local authorities. And you've got a table in the report that demonstrates how well the council is performing against these criteria. So it's worth keeping those in mind as a reference point for the rest of the discussion. I've got an update to point 8 in your pack. In terms of the item in that table about the health and wellbeing strategy, I understand that the clinical commissioning groups and the RUH's sustainability plans address that. On to the next, please. So you've got this image in your report, I think. And it just details some of the areas of good practice that we've come across over the year. We've been involved with. So you've got some highlights here. It's not just talking about council action, of course, because any success that we have is shared. It's action across the community. So the latest government data shows that Bath and North East Somerset area-wide emissions have reduced to 63% of the baseline year, that was 2005. And the community have been doing a great job playing their part in helping us. For example, it's the residents who've led us to being the 4th placed unitary authority on recycling. And they've been very keen to join in with the solar panel group buying scheme that we've been running along with the West of England Combined Authority. 33 businesses have taken action to decarbonise by having a carbon audit, implementing carbon saving measures supported by grant funding. And the council's own emissions are down by 66% compared to the baseline year of 2010. On to the next page. So some more graphs that I think you've got in your pack. So our council has been a leader in this area over many years. The top graph shows the carbon reductions that we've seen over the last 11 years, and the council has been a leader in street lighting upgrades for energy efficient LED lights, and has award-winning low carbon office buildings in Keynsham Civic Centre. So as a council, we're providing leadership to continue the area-wide cuts in carbon emissions through partnership working with lots of our local organisations. On to the next page. I wonder if I've broken up. I can't now see the next page. I'm hoping that you can hear me talking.
Sarah.
Hello. Oh yeah, I can hear you now. Brilliant. Did you lose me?
No, and we've got a slide which says achievements and delivery across the following.
Perfect. Great. I'll put my video off and that will help, I think. Okay. So I'll run through some of the highlights of what we've done in the last year. So in terms of leadership and lobbying, we've pushed the West of England Combined Authority for more ambition in lots of areas. Their climate strategy, their climate funding, their bus service improvement plan, and on protecting our existing threatened bus services. Personally, I went and gave evidence at the Bristol Airport Planning Inquiry, which was in line with the 2019 climate emergency motion that was passed at full council here, that pledged to oppose the expansion of Bristol Airport. As a council, we've been lobbying government for more ambition in lots of areas through UK 100, which is an organisation we're a member of highly ambitious councils on climate emergency, through the Local Government Association and other routes. So, for example, we're lobbying government around improving their approach to energy efficiency through building regulations. And at COP26, we sent 6 case studies by Bath and North East Somerset, so they were included in one of the exhibitions there. Then on policy alignment, I'll just have a drink. We're aiming to bring our planning policy in line with the Climate Emergency Declaration. Our local plan partial update is currently in inspection, and we're the first council to do this for climate reasons. We hope very much at the end of that to have the first policy in the UK that will set a target for embodied energy and true zero carbon, but that's all subject to examination by the planning inspector, who could say that that is too challenging, of course, for developers. We've got supplementary planning documents that were recently consulted on to make energy efficient retrofit and transport planning policies reflect the climate emergency. We have this last year a new climate focused procurement strategy as a council. There's a waste strategy in development, and in fact, we've as a council have been a leader in recycling for many years. We've got some key transport plans coming along. So right at the moment, we're consulting on Journey to Net Zero, which is a vision for zero carbon transport in Bath and North East Somerset. There are other areas of strength. Avon Pension Fund is divesting from fossil fuels, and our Treasury management is now investing in environmental, social and governance funds. Then on to organisational changes. So this is internal to the council organisation. We're embedding climate action across all departments. So we've got additional budget and new posts and new structure will be proposed through the budget setting process shortly. And we are recruiting to some posts in the new structure. We've got a new service, so the Sustainable Communities Directorate and the Green Transformation Team, who will lead this work. We've got the Integrated Key Performance Reporting Framework, which includes climate-related indicators, which will be used to measure performance internally. We've been offering climate literacy training, so it has been offered to all members, to all councillors, and is now being rolled out through the organisation to all staff from director level downwards. And the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, which is the way that we plan services, is now incorporating carbon emissions much more comprehensively. And then around delivery and implementation, we have, of course, brought in the first charging clean air zone outside London and went live just 4 months late, despite being in the midst of a pandemic shortly before. In other areas, we are giving out grants for energy efficiency for the most vulnerable, including new heating systems and solar to help protect them against soaring energy prices. We're upgrading our council buildings, and we'll hear more about that shortly from some officers. And we've got a consultation underway on livable neighborhoods, which will make it easier to walk and cycle around our area. We're developing some high quality cycle routes. We've planted around 27,000 trees on council and non-council land, and we're building a passive house school. So now on to the next page. Yep, so this is the point at which I'm going to hand over to talk through some really inspiring examples of what some of this activity actually looks like on the ground. So initially, I think I've got Chris May from Property Services to tell us about Keynsham Recycling Hub project. And then after that, we'll have Nick Plumley. Oh no, I think it must be the other way around. We've got Nick first talking about our supported accommodation in which we're making energy efficiency improvements, and ADL's project at Slade Brook Road. So with that, I'll hand over to Nick.
Good afternoon, members. I'm Nick Plumley from Housing Services, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to come along today and talk to you about, as Councillor Warren says, what we've been doing to put things into practice. So just as an introduction in terms of what our overall aim with the programme is, as Councillor Warren said, it's got to be about leadership. So what we wanted to make sure that we set a high standard for our ongoing building works and construction projects. And so what we're aiming to do is to achieve a consistent standard. So the new build residential properties that we create should meet Acb Standard or better or equivalent, because obviously this is an evolving industry. And residential properties that we create by converting a building or refurbishing a building should meet the retrofit standard of that Acb standard, again, or better or equivalent, but crucially where practical. So you've got to accept that all retrofit schemes are not the same, and they all have their own particular things that you've got to factor in. So if I can ask the next slide, please. So I mentioned the Acb Standard. That is an organisation which stands for the Association of Energy Conscious Building. And that was set up to promote sustainable building in the UK and to be the UK platform for passive house, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's a very complex and detailed standard, as you would expect, but for me, the common elements to kind of pick out as key are, first of all, it's about getting the fabric of the building right in the first place, so that you're not constantly fighting against an ineffective fabric, and then going down into slightly more detail of air tightness, which is about ensuring air moving in and out of the building is kept to a managed minimum. It's about thermal bridging, which is a term used to describe the activity of temperature on the outside of the building, being able to bridge the structure and influence the temperature inside the building by effectively leaching out heat from the fabric of the building. Insulation, obviously, mechanical ventilation and heat recovery is very important. One of the misnomers about passive house and energy efficient buildings is that somehow mould and condensation are a problem. But indeed that is a factor, but it's managed by these mechanical ventilation and heat recovery systems. And obviously it goes without saying that finally the windows need to be extremely effective. Next slide, please. I won't dwell on this for too long, but this is just a selection of images to show number one, for example, is a section of an air tightness approach. You'll see that the inside of the building is effectively wrapped in airtight membranes, which is then bonded using a special tape to the windows to again eliminate any air travel through that structural opening. And you'll see that there are triple glazed glazing units installed as well. And on the outside, you can see there is a section of, again, air tightness membrane to prevent air coming from the outside. The second image there just shows a Victorian terrace that's been retrofitted. The blue one in the middle you'll see is that colour. That's indicating very little of the heat inside the property is getting out compared to its neighbour. So that proves that you can do that and make very distinct improvements. Section 3, the picture 3 there is about the thermal envelope. So you'll see the red hue on the inside of the diagram there. That shows the points at which the inside can be influenced by the outside of the building, and it's about effectively eliminating those bridges or reducing them to a minimum, because image number 4 there shows you an effect of poor thermal bridging, whereby the outside temperature from that window is being able to make the wall a different temperature to the rest of the room, thus inviting mould. And then the last image just shows a diagram of a heat recovery ventilator, indicating that it takes warm air from the warm part of the house, like the kitchen and bathrooms, freshens that and disperses it into the cooler areas of the house, so that you're effectively making better use of the property's heat. Next slide, please. So we've mentioned case studies. I wanted to touch on 2 very different schemes. One being a retrofit scheme to an extremely challenging building. Many of you will recognise Grosvenor Place, just off London Road. That's a Grade 1 listed 1790s-ish Georgian townhouse. It's stone built, which means there's no cavity. So you're starting from a very challenging point in terms of insulation. And of course, it's got enormous single glazed sash windows, which are not known for their insulative qualities. But actually, by thinking creatively about heating insulation using hidden solar panels, by installing very sensitive secondary glazing, and by really doing the maximum we possibly could on draft proofing, we've actually managed to achieve an outcome that we expect to be a 40% reduction in both carbon emissions and energy usage. Now that's critical, because obviously the client group there, this is going to be supported move on accommodation for former rough sleepers, and it's crucial that we don't expose people to any greater costs than absolutely necessary on energy. So that whilst not perfect, what it does do is show you can make major improvements to very challenging buildings in terms of energy efficiency and carbon emissions. Next slide, please. So the last one, as Councillor Warren mentioned, this is the properties at Slate Brook Road in Bath. These ones were again built to the Acb new build standard, using modern methods of construction in the form of off-site precision manufactured panels. They are equipped with solar panels and air source heat pumps. And 2 of those properties are going to be shared ownership affordable homes for local people. The really fantastic achievement with that development is that it's carbon zero in use. And compared to a normal property of equivalent size, you're looking at more than 6 tonnes of reduction in CO2 produced per year. And in fact, the property contributes to the grid in terms of energy that it captures versus what it's expected to use. And again, the good news for local residents is that actually the bills are going to be around 50% lower, we think, for residents. Also, it was a really good opportunity to test a modern manufactured technique and look at the benefits for ourselves, because if we move to the last slide, one of the key messages here is it's about there's an awful lot to learn. But we've already achieved some really positive outcomes. We've already busted some pretty big myths. We've gained a really good understanding now of costs, design implications, what the limitations might be for what we can achieve, and therefore how we can plan against that. And also the impact that these kind of measures have on timescales, because the industry is very used to rattling off very quickly a kind of traditional product, But actually what we're finding is that it does take a lot more time and thought to deliver the higher standard that we now rightly need to achieve. It's also clear that modern methods of constructions are very much support this fabric first approach for new build. So we're seeing that you can get a far higher quality of precision with these off-site manufactured products. And again, it's for us to promote the existence of those with local people to make sure that there's no sort of prejudice around somehow, prefab or other old kind of labels that those techniques can sometimes have. And as I say, I think there's a lot more to learn, but what we have done is entered the market with a strong positive step to show that we're expecting a much higher standard. Chair, if I can leave it there and invite any questions.
Well, if we thank you very much for that, Nick and Sarah. I'm just having a look at the chat. Are we ready to go on to discussion? Oh, we're moving on to a second case study. Yeah.
More to go, yeah.
Shall we rattle through the second case study so we can get on to the discussion with the panel, if that's okay, Nick?
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I'll run through this next case study. My name is Christopher May. I'm from the Construction Maintenance and Capital Project Delivery team. This is an exciting new proposed waste and recycling hub developed to the northeast of Keynsham that will help residents of Baines recycle more, and in doing so will help tackle the climate emergency. The development will consolidate current operational facilities on 4 other sites within a state-of-the-art centralised facility at Pixash Lane, and will include a modern public reuse and recycling centre. Happy to go on to the next slide. In line with the Council's climate and ecological emergency declarations, the scheme will integrate carefully considered sustainability measures with the flexibility and adaptability to meet future demands over the 40 to 50 years ahead of us, including on-site renewable energy generation, building fabric efficiency, and enhanced ecological systems. Within this slide, we've got some key sections numbered from 1 highlighting the planting and wildlife corridors we're including around the site to the northeast and southern boundaries, the solar panels on all roofs, sustainable drainage strategy across the site, rainwater harvesting underground to support vehicle washing, the fabric first building design of the offices and welfare section of the main building, and future-proofing for the existing electric vehicle fleet by introducing subground ductwork and provisions for easy retrofitting electric vehicle charging, in addition to the electric vehicle charging points we'll already install across the site as part of this project. Next slide, please. So the summary of this key site is the biodiversity net gain of 17% through strengthening wildlife corridors, new planting consisting of over 200 plus trees and 500 metres of perimeter hedgerow on site itself. There's a further 0.8 hectares of land established within the Keynsham Memorial Park, which will be part of the enhanced off-site works as part of this project for biodiversity offset. The renewable energy generation from the site of some 3,800 metres squared of solar panel arrays to the building rooftops will result in a net zero carbon for regulated energy. These produce approximately 783 kilowatt peak hour productions, not quite meeting the full demands of the site at peak rate, but offsetting over the course of a typical day during operational times. The benefits from reduction in grid electricity carbon emissions throughout the life of its operation by use of the solar panels. Greenhouse gas emissions will be minimised and will reduce during lifespan of the development. and the office and welfare building seen in this picture, designed fabric first to again meet the council's sustainability checklist. And next slide, please. So the scheme has been designed with the future flexibility in mind to adapt to new recycling developments and technologies. This will help deliver the council's core policies of tackling the climate and ecological emergency. It will provide modern, easily accessible waste and recycling services facilities for our residents, meet the need for household waste and recycling and curbside collections now and in the future, to provide operational facilities to manage significant change, to maximise opportunities and respond to the emerging national strategy and the Environment Bill, to adapt to change and take advantage of improved technology and ways of working, modernising our facilities so we can increase recycling and reduce the amount we send to landfill for treatment, provide a central depot for refuse and recycling collection vehicles, improving our services to residents, and create new employment opportunities for local people and businesses with supply chains during the construction and operational period. The operational hub to ensure our residents will have a continuous access to waste and recycling. What I can add to that is the minimising recycling of all materials is an essential contribution to the reducing carbon emissions. The site itself, the sorting and baling equipment necessary is sized to accommodate increasing tonnage of recyclate to enable us to increase our handling of these materials. The future replacement of refuse and recycling vehicles to electric powered vehicles is being planned up front within the infrastructure to future-proof the site where necessary, which would cover ductwork for this charging for a fleet of approximately 60 plus heavy goods vehicles. We'll use specialist route planning software that's been introduced already for the refuse, recycling and garden waste rounds to minimise distance and travel and to avoid local community impacts wherever possible. The hub itself is on a strategic road network for access to the ring road and motorway for bulk haulage of waste away from site to the treatment and reprocessing sites within the region and across the UK. And the size of the site is to allow bulk haulage with articulated lorries to minimise the number of loads of trucks going out and the fuel used as part of that development. And in fact, consolidating the site, as we've seen from 4 separate locations, actually means the vehicle fleet is maintained on site, fueled on site, and runs from one single point of operation, minimising HGV use on the roads network generally. Okay, that's the summary of the presentation. Hopefully that was concise enough, but open that to any questions you may have.
Thanks, Christopher. Joel, do you want a last couple of slides from me around what's done on community engagement?
Perfect.
So in the process of revising our climate emergency web pages, and we've got a dedicated climate section on the council's newsroom. We've got a community area forum, and we've been working closely with those parishes to support them who have declared their own climate emergencies, and to assist them and train them and help them to respond effectively. We've launched an online community network called Zero Carbon Nature Positive Network. So that was recently launched, and you can go and find it online and sign up for that. We're working with our partners through groupings like the Schools Climate Network and a range of partners, including businesses and public sector, through the Future Ambition Board. And we've got specific social media channels sharing green news and events. On to the next. So we had our first Climate and Biodiversity Festival over 2 weeks in September. We had over 35 events. It was very much led by the community. And more than 500 people took part. Some of them were able to happen in person, as you can see. I was able to attend the 3SG's Funding for Eco Projects event, which was excellent and very inspiring. And some of them took place online. On to the next. So in terms of the action plan, what you can expect to see going forward, essentially, as you've gathered, we as a council are leading by doing things. So in terms of our 2030 priorities over the coming year, we expect to see 2 further care homes made energy efficient. We'll be developing the area-wide approach to retrofit. We hope that the local plan partial update will be adopted and it supports net zero carbon new build and retrofit and more renewables. We'll be progressing construction of our low carbon recycling centre, as you've heard. In terms of transport, we can expect further work on our livable neighbourhoods and some projects to be delivered. Our Tranche 2 active travel cycle routes on Upper Bristol Road and Beckford Road will be constructed. We expect that the bus enhanced partnership will be adopted with the West of England Combined Authority, and we will begin planning for the early stages of the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund project, for which we've received a lot of funding through WECA, the West of England Combined Authority. Then in terms of renewables, we can expect to see solar on 2 more care homes, and we'll be developing a longer term pipeline of projects and a district-wide approach. We can also expect to see our Ecological Emergency Action Plan developed, and we're hoping in terms of community engagement to see a second climate festival and further support for forums and parishes. And then on the final slide, I can show you a sneak preview of the route map. So at the last time I came to this panel, there was a request for a clearer, more visually appealing route map. I'm afraid this one is still under construction, which is why you haven't received a copy of it yet, but it will be ready by the time that we discuss this at the full council meeting in March. The reason why it's taken some time is that we've had some sickness in the team, and we've also had some turnover of staff. So there have been times over the course of the last year when we've been extremely short-staffed. But this is what it's going to look like. So you can see, I think, how hard we have been working over the last year. We may not always have been as good as we should have been about shouting about what we're doing, given all the other pressures on the organisation, but we're now working hard to correct that. You, I am sure, will spot areas in which we are not doing enough, because no council ever could, given the scale of the climate crisis. But it is absolutely clear that we are doing an enormous amount when we compare ourselves with councils of a similar size. And the evidence for that is that we were shortlisted last year for the MJ Awards in the field of climate leadership. We'll be entering again this year with an even better story to tell. So at this point, I'll just refer you back and remind you about the Local Government Association's 10-point checklist, which might be a really useful way to structure the discussion. And I really look forward to hearing what you've got to say and welcome your suggestions as to what we can do more of. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to you, the team, and particularly to Nick and Chris for bringing to life, I think, the strategy with then some real life examples of what the authority is actually doing. So I think that was really helpful. I've got a list already of 4 people with questions. If we take them through and if Nick and Chris are happy to kind of pick up the questions on the specifics of the case study as we go through, I think that's probably the best way to do it. So I've got Shelley first, I think, to kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Some really inspiring presentations there. Thank you. That was very helpful, actually. I think it will be really good to be able to refer to that. It's just really a question about retrofitting. So I don't know if this is one for you, Sarah, or for Nick, but I mean, more generally, I think we talked about this originally about a year and a half ago, but just thinking going forward about incentives for retrofitting for private homeowners, really. Would this be a central government thing? I mean, I know there was a sort of a private company, I think it was an American company, that was given this role and nothing really happened. And then I don't know if there's anything that's been put in its place since then. So if that's a central government thing, or if it's more for us to do, I'm not sure really.
Okay, Sarah?
I'll have a go, and then if there's more detail that the officers would like to fill in, they're welcome to. We have a section of our website called, I think it's Energy at Home, and if you go on there, there are various grants for different groupings of people that you can use to spend on retrofit. But I think that solving the whole retrofit conundrum is a difficult thing for a unitary authority to do on their own. So we are doing quite a bit in terms of, I mean, that part of our website is actually very good. So if you haven't looked at it before, it's really worth going and having a look. And because there is lots of support available, but there could and should be more, and we will be working, I think, with our partners at the West of England Combined Authority and lobbying upwards and to try and do that. And Jane Wildblood would like to add something.
Brilliant. Go ahead, Jane.
Okay, thanks. Hi. Yes, just to say, this is something we are actively looking at the moment in terms of how can we develop a better approach for residents. We're supporting at the moment a really good idea that WECA have come up with as part of the WECA Mayor's Retrofit Accelerator, which is about setting up a hub for the whole of the West of England, rather than us trying to do it in each individual local authority, that is a hub for everything. So for advice for residents, so that they get the right kind of advice, that they get good assessments of what they can do on their property, so that when they go to the building trades, they've got a plan that makes sense. And then also really looking at how do we tackle the supply chain, because that's the really big problem, is that there aren't enough builders out there that actually know how to do it, or even are interested in doing it. So there's a whole raft of things that could come together within that hub, which will help to solve some of the problems that you've just described, and would then link with our website and the Energy at Home advice that we can give.
That's really helpful, and I wonder whether in future updates whether we can maybe do a bit of a feature around retrofitting and kind of the challenges that our authority has around that, because I think they're huge because of the stock of our buildings, and maybe then how we're kind of the council's kind of trying to facilitate moving that forward. Okay, let's move on to Lisa.
Thank you. I've got, hear me? Yep. Questions and comments, if that's acceptable. One for each of the presentations. Sarah, if I can go to the climate emergency, and that certainly there seems to be a lot of new initiatives having been developed. I was a little puzzled though that under 3.10, where you summarize the area-wide emissions, you use some very, very old comparisons. So you compared from 2005 to 2019, the baseline, and then council buildings and operations from then another one from going back to 2009. So you the information you've given about this very substantial reduction in emissions is over a very long period of time, and I was rather concerned, to say the least, at the other comment that you said emissions from council buildings and operations for the year 2021 are 3,000 whatever, similar to 1920. And so although the overall emissions time have come down by these impressive figures, the near-term ones have not. So that's question one. Question two is quite a straightforward one to Nick. In terms of Grosvenor Place, and it was very encouraging to see that you really had tackled the grade 1 listed challenges. But it must have come at a very, very substantial cost. And therefore, in terms of equating the profitability or the cost factor, cost to use factor of retrofitting a grade 1 building to achieve a 40% reduction, as opposed to retrofitting more modern buildings to perhaps achieve a larger reduction. So I'd like a question around that. And finally, to the gentleman, sorry,
Chris, was it?
Chris, who talked about Pixash Lane, and obviously it's right on the bottom of my patch. Two comments really. One, that looking in detail at the plans, your last picture shows vehicles in parking lots, presumably having to get a parking lot and then do their recycling from that parking lot. Whereas at the moment, because Pixash Lane is circular, if you've got a lot of timber to let go, you can stop at timber, and then you could go around the corner to the mechanical, metal, etc. So it actually is easier for residents, particularly less able residents, not to have to carry too much. So it's a question really about where you say you're going to improve the facilities to allow easily accessible waste recycling, whether in fact it's not going to be as easy as it is at the moment. And finally, another comment relating to your HGVs, the 2 access roads, and you, in your plans, there was no change to those access roads. One is very narrow, albeit made narrow by parking along one side. The other one is a wide road, but also has parking along that. So I think in terms of the Pixash Lane development, you're also going to need to look at the infrastructure, because otherwise you're going to have a lot of clogging by these large HGVs. Thank you, Chair, for being.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Okay, so if we've got data, we've got Grosvenor and the costs, and we've got Pickash, 2 specific things, one about access, one about the parking. Can we try and pick those off, Sarah, one by one?
Yeah, I'll have a go at the data, and I'm sure that officers will chip in if I get anything wrong, or if I don't know all the detail. I mean, Lisa, your first point was about using old data, and I think you might remember the last meeting when we tried to have a look at some more recent data, and we ran into some problems because we found that the nationally collected data is not updated, so it's 2 or 3 years out of date. So it was I remember trying to look at that data with you as a group last May or so, and it was fairly unsatisfactory. So I think we get a better look at things by looking over at a longer period. But I'm sure the officers may have some comments to add to that. And in terms of not having seen very much reduction over the last 2 years, I suppose some of those big changes, so for example, Keynsham Civic Centre and the LED lighting being rolled out, had already happened. And then after the climate emergency declaration, some of these other, so in terms of actual council carbon emissions from council energy use, I guess these other projects that you've heard about now have a bit of a lead in time. So we should, as they come live, we should start to see further reductions. But perhaps Jane or another member of the team would like to add more.
Jane?
No, I don't think so, Sarah. I think that's yeah.
Okay, shall we move on to then Grosvenor? So is that you, Nick?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I think in answer to the question, clearly, yes, it does come at a cost. But there's 2 factors that you've got to kind of apply to that. One is you're entering the market at a fairly premature stage where actually it's not the norm. So what you're asking for is supplied by a relatively narrow range of technical experts. So inevitably it takes a bit more time and it costs more. But I think the key thing is that you are paying more, but you're also getting a better quality building, as well as the energy and carbon reduction benefits. So with Grosvenor, we did allow around 5% of the budget for improvements, which is, I'm sure you'd agree, a very reasonable allowance. And actually, however, because it was a complete refurbishment anyway, you were in a position where you're not having to retrofit an already perfect setup. You are in the gut it and start again territory. So actually the extra costs weren't as apparent. Interestingly, another project that we're working through at the moment at Theobald House, that one is slightly clearer in terms of the extra costs, and indeed those extra costs are substantial. So I'm going to say around 100,000 more than it would cost you to do it the traditional way, but you are making enormous energy savings in use, and you are getting a far higher quality outcome at the end of it. So it's not just paying the price for the climate. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Nick. And I guess if there's more detail, Lisa, you can follow up with Nick after the meeting. I'm conscious we're going to be running tight on time. So can we pick up, Chris, the points about Pickash Lane fairly quickly? And if there's more to follow up on, we can follow that up in due course.
No, that's fine. I'll just respond to Councillor just with regards to the RRC, the Public Recycling Centre, is set up on a similar level to the existing, in the sense that it's a rotary function for coming in one section and driving round a one-way system around the the site, with the lower section being reuse and small recycling, moving up onto the upper deck for bulk waste recycling. Although it looks like you might be finding and looking for a parking space and walking some distance, there will be signage incorporated for directing free spaces. But these are shown on a max usage to reduce queuing, with reversing to a bay rather than just driving to the nearest bay available. In fact, with spreading the bays out and having 18 plus bays there, with perhaps a wood recycling, a general waste recycling at either end of the site, your travel distance should be less wherever you park. So the idea is to keep the flow of vehicles moving, and in actual fact, we probably quadrupled the turnaround time of vehicles compared with Pixash as it currently stands. As far as Hgv access to and from the site, primarily the main routes through Ashmead Road, as you quite rightly pointed out, and currently they've brought back parking on the roadside, which I saw today, which isn't ideal, and quite frankly, that may change with highways intervention to reduce parking. We've designed the site around development to ensure that parking that's related to the recycling centre is purely on-site if required, with no off-site parking permitted, with other routes of transport for staff and members to get in and out, with small bus routes. The Hgv parking is driving in and out to site has been transport modelled to show minimum, if not less, impact on the road network because of the hours of use, and it's the main vehicle flows are actually outside the peak hours of flow, which helps no end. And of course, we've got to remember that in Ashmead Road, it's the central hub already for the general household materials recycling facility, which already has the main bulk of HGVs driving in through that section. So we will control and monitor that accordingly with timed setups. And again, unlike Ashmead Road currently, which doesn't have the site and facility for bringing vehicles in and out, we've got an enhanced weighbridge and vehicle flow movement sensor as you come into the main operational part of the site, which ensures continual movement, and again, truck holding on site, not off site, while they're depositing waste. And the whole design of the site is actually to segregate operational from public use, which would help with that cross and transfer of vehicles that you normally see on waste sites, which makes this fairly unique, separating the two streams of domestic to operational to ensure there aren't stop-starts from delays that often occur when one has to move and the other can't.
Thank you, Chris.
Hopefully that answers some of the questions.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, helpful to kind of get that detail. Grant, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentations, everyone. We have so much to scrutinise here that we could have benefited from some of these being split out for a more focused debate, I felt. But I'm going to try and summarise my thoughts and then ask my questions. There seems to be a lot of very good paperwork being produced, but I just think that comes with very little substance and actual physical actioning on the climate emergency. I think we need to be far more ambitious. We are also overwhelmingly relying on funding from WECA and the huge commitments made by Labour's Dan Norris, rather than clearly adjusting our own budgets to help fight the climate emergency with a sense of urgency. As you know, we had very little to scrutinise last week in terms of the budget. There also appears to be a lot of hot air being directed at citizens' juries, which I can only see are being introduced to take the pressure off the administration for their more unpopular transport projects. I just feel this is another way of slowing down any implementation when, as I've just said, we are in an emergency and we need that urgency. It is, however, great to see the educational facilities being a commitment of the recycling hub, and I really hope this is properly utilised to embed that sustainable culture within younger individuals for years to come. To go on to my questions, my first is regarding waste. In your highlight reports, you are celebrating a reduction in waste sent to landfill, but from the figures sent to me when I questioned the cabinet member recently, it would appear the main reason for this reduction is because of waste being sent for incineration to produce energy. Is the council monitoring the impact of the harmful gases that are produced from this process, and will they take steps to ensure that residents understand how their waste is being handled, as currently household waste sent for recycling is actually lower than it was in 16 to 17, 17 to 18 and 18 to 19 as a percentage of all wastes? And then my second question, again on that, the highlight report, you've got 13.6 thousand trees with a commitment to plant 100,000 by May next year. How are we going to achieve it?
Grant, I'm going to pause that question because we did at the previous panel have a big piece on the tree piece, so we did cover that in detail, but let's pick up your key point around the waste data. And I see that Dave's popped up, so I don't know, is it Dave and Sarah who wanted to cover this, or one of the officers?
Yeah, I think a combination of me and Sarah is probably the right one there. So in terms of landfill versus energy for waste, so there's a very clear and accepted waste hierarchy, which says that the very worst thing that you can do with waste from an environmental point of view is landfill. And then the next worst, if you like, is energy from waste. And I'll come back to that in a second. To take the second part of the question, our percentage rate of recycling in the last year is the highest that it's ever been. So there has been no year in the history of Baines where it's been higher. If you've seen some figures that seems to be less clear on that, I'll have a look at that again, because that's very much the case. We've had a higher proportion of recycling, and that helps to address why less waste is going to landfill. But also there is very much a positive policy of saying landfill is the very worst thing that we can do with waste. And therefore, the best thing to do is to recycle along with reuse and not consume at all. But then it's energy from waste as the least worst option after that. And I'll just touch on, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to just pick you up on then the bit around the incineration piece that Grant was talking about and the fumes.
Yes, yeah. So energy from waste. So that is a good question that I'll take away in terms of the monitoring of that. Obviously, the main objective is to use the method which produces less damaging environmental impact. But I'll see the extent to which that's quantified. And I know you sort of talked about trees being addressed last time. I'll just very briefly mention that the figures presented today is the direct planting by Baines Council, and we're very clear at the last meeting and at the previous meeting and so on, that this is very much a partnership approach. This is Baines showing leadership and encouraging our partners and facilitating our partners to tree plant as well. So the kind of the scores on the doors figure is a lot higher than that, as reported at the last meeting. But that's
we've got time to come back to trees at the end. Yeah. Let's try and do that, but let's keep kind of moving through. So I've now got Andy Waite, I think, next.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to point out that I've been here the whole time. And the fact that there were two of me at one point was very worrying for me, and I'm sure for Sophie as well. But I think we've worked that one out now. So apologies for those of you who were confused about where I was. I was here all the time, I promise. My question is to Chris, really, about the Keynsham recycling. And I'm very pleased that Lisa didn't ask it, because I thought I was going to have nothing to say. And my question is about the 17% net gain, because obviously a 17% net gain is a very positive thing, and we should be encouraged to do that. But he then went on to say that included working in Keynsham Memorial Park, which confused me a lot, because Keynsham Memorial Park is about half a mile from the Pixash Lane Recycling Centre. And it's the first I've heard of it, despite the fact that I'm a ward councillor for that area, and I actually am on the committee that looks at Keynsham Memorial Park. So I was quite surprised that I didn't know about that. And so my question is that a common practice that you sort of go to another part of Baines to do your net gain? And what proportion of Cambridge Memorial Park is going to be affected and what is going to be done?
Right. Can we pick that up fairly quickly, Chris? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It's the positive net gain side that's on general commitment over and above the development as it exists to the planned requirement of uplift of the environmental ecological net gain over a wider field. So it is usual practice if you weren't developing a brownfield site, if you weren't developing a warehouse or industrial section, as is the case with Pixash currently, that the amount of improved points or the score for points for the land on a biodiversity side, it's often the case to have to gain those points outside or a wider for a wider remit. And land is valued on point scoring, as you're probably aware, with regards to its benefits for the butterflies, insects, and potential increased growth for that particular area. So a plain meadow or grass will have less points than a wild meadow or grass with the right levels of planting, which is basically what's being looked at within the Keynsham Memorial Park, of a small section within the park to reduce a section of green space or standard grass sections within that to wild planting, so more natural planting within that area. So that's been resulted as a back off on this project as an area of enhancement to another space that exists, which have a lower ecological value.
Okay.
Can I just ask, please, for Chris to offline to explain to me where it is, what it is, how big is it, all those sort of questions? Because
yeah, that would be really helpful.
No, that's fine.
I'm slightly worrying I'm hurrying people, but let's see how we go. I think actually, Sarah, were you wanting to jump in, or was that an old MIS?
Well, I was wanting to respond to some of Councillor Johnson's more critical comments, which showed a certain amount of misunderstanding, and I just wanted to help him with that. Is this the right moment for that?
Yeah, let's go ahead, because I think there's only me at the moment left as speakers, unless anybody else wants to do an MIS. So go ahead, Sarah.
It was just to clarify, really, the West of England Combined Authority is now our transport authority, and that's how government gives out funding. So it's entirely and absolutely appropriate that we obtain our funding for transport measures through that role. And also to give you a little bit of background information about citizens' panels, which seek to elicit informed and considered public opinion about the conditions under which people will or will not support different policy options and the principles underlying these decisions. So again, it's absolutely appropriate that we should be using that technique to help us to understand how to bring in measures that a certain portion of the public might find challenging.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so the question I had, which was really on the substantive paper and the kind of the update, was really focusing in on where are we? The renewable energy production in Baines. And I'm not sure at the moment that we've kind of majored on this, but certainly my research looking on the Friends of the Earth, comparing councils to councils, is saying that Baines is currently generating through renewable energy 33 gigawatt hours, I think is what GWH stands for, or enough power for 11,000 homes. And at the best equivalent local authority in with a similar demographic in the UK is doing about 10 times that. So I think you mentioned in the presentation a little bit about solar and development on solar on a number of sites. That I'm kind of wanting to get a sense of, have we got a target of what we're shooting for around renewable energy generation? Have we got an idea about how we're going to share that energy dividends with people maybe who are suffering with fuel poverty, and kind of what that kind of forward look is moving forward about the strategic approach, really?
So, I mean, I'll have a go, and I'm sure the officers will want to add. So what I would say is, obviously in Bath and North East Somerset, we do have some particular challenges in putting in renewables between, well, essentially our World Heritage status and Other aspects such as the Cotswold area of outstanding natural beauty and the flight path to Bristol Airport, all those factors limit our ability to bring in renewables as far and as fast as we might like. The other thing is that we simply haven't actually had the capacity over the last couple of years. What with COVID rather stopped us in our tracks, I think, in sustainability team, it's fair to say, for a year or so. What I would say is that we are now recruiting a specialist in this area, and so I think we've had studies done, in fact, that Jane will tell us more about, or one of the other officers, over that time, and we're recruiting a specialist, and that's when we will really start to, I hope, see things motor forward much faster.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and granted, put in the chat that maybe we can, when the time's right, maybe bring forward that strategic thinking around that back to the panel, if that's possible.
Yes, and I hope that I will be later this year. I hope.
Okay, did Jane want to jump in there, or shall we move on to Ruth's question? No. Okay, Ruth.
Well, it's not really a question. It's just that it's amazing the amount of different areas that work has been done. It's very impressive, I think. However, there's one thing that I can't see unless I've missed it, which is to do with supporting sustainable farming locally. So, for example, local market gardens, and it'd be nice to have that at some point included in there. And also another thing that I'm very keen on is to try and encourage local schools to provide more plant-based food for their students, more vegan food. And also perhaps at some point in the council owned buildings as well, but certainly where the schools are concerned, it's a question of working with them and encouraging them, I think, but that also has an impact on the future of our health of our world, really. So
yes,
if that could be included at some point, that would be great too. Thank you.
Sarah?
Yes, I'll have a go at some of that. I think in the past, Bath and North East Somerset had expertise in locally sourced and sustainable food, and unfortunately those posts were cut under the previous administration. So it's not something we've had the capacity to progress yet, but I agree with you that it's incredibly important that we move forward in that area. I'm not sure if Jane or the other officers have anything they'd like to add on that.
No, that's right, Sarah.
Am I right in thinking that Baines used to have a sustainability food strategy, which did come to this panel at one point?
Yeah, we had a local food partnership that was a collaborative piece of work between sustainability and public health. It was funded by public health, and it was looking at how to increase local food production and consumption, because we know that the farmers would produce more for local consumption if demand was greater locally and there were better ways to get to market. So there were a number of projects that were underway during that time. And then it was coupled with really trying to tackle food poverty. And that basically that work was, the funding stopped for that work for various reasons in the past in terms of the public health element, and they've now resurrected some of that work. So there is now some work going on within public health on food poverty, and particularly during the COVID crisis, they've been really busy supporting all kinds of initiatives in the community to help people to access local food. But yes, Sarah is right. At the moment, we don't have the capacity to look at the bigger picture, but there are conversations starting about how we can do that. So that's for something a bit further down the line.
And the second bit of Ruth's question really about food choices, particularly, I guess, where the authority is purchasing food, that would be interesting also to unpack it, whether now or at some point in the future.
I think the truth is that we actually don't purchase any.
Right, okay. Because all the schools are privatised off. Yeah, okay. All right. Oh, so, Ruth, you wanted to just add to that?
Well, yeah, I was just agreeing, but I think, it's a question of working with them, that whole thing of working in partnership with others. Yeah, that's key, I think. But yeah, right. Thank you for that.
I've kind of hurried people, and now I think we're a bit ahead of time. So do we want to go back to the tree thing and grants? Because I kind of cut you off slightly, Grant.
I'm not worried about that. I think it was sufficiently answered. But and also I did miss that meeting, which is why I didn't know the answer. Just to, if I may, just going back to Ruth's point about what's happening with agriculture, especially in our area. I do work for an agricultural company. And I think there is a lot of ways at the moment how the private sector are trying to change things, especially in the way animals are fed. And they are doing a lot of work on methane reduction as part of animals' diets, which is really a really interesting piece of work that's being produced, and they are trialing it across the country. So that could see a significant impact, and we might actually get to a stage where we start seeing you can understand when you're purchasing your joint of beef for your Sunday roast, whatever, how much methane that has produced based on what the animal's been fed. So there is a lot of work, I think, in the private sector that is going on to try and address some of those issues.
So it may be as part of our leadership role as the council to try and influence farming practices, particularly in North East Somerset, that we've got some work that we could pick up there. Okay. Does anyone else want to add in on either the detail of the update or the specific case studies? Because there was a lot of information in the case studies as well, because I know I've kind of rushed people along a little bit. I'm not seeing anybody particularly gesticulating, so I'm assuming then that's great. So thank you for the team, because there was clearly a lot of work in all of those papers and in those case studies, and that's been very helpful, and we'll look forward. Is the next update coming in 12 months' time? Is that right, Sarah? Or do we get? I've forgotten.
I believe so. I think the reason you had 2 last year was because there was something outstanding that had to be picked up on a second occasion. Something like that. I think typically it's going to be annually, and an officer will correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, and I think the plan was it with when we were doing agenda planning was that you'll maybe bring some every alternate meeting a kind of a cabinet leads report, which will maybe provide some short-term updates on some work in progress. Okay, I think then that moves us on to the final agenda item, which is the work plan. Now I know we've only briefly discussed it only last week, so I'm assuming that people know that if they've got ideas that they want to add on to the work plan and whatever, to let the chair and Michaela know. Is there any comments or issues that people want to flag up? No, so apologies for hurrying people. We're now finishing maybe 10 minutes ahead of schedule, but that's good. So thank you all for your participation, your questions, and all the officers' work on bringing the reports and the detail to us. It's much appreciated.